Welcome to this special edition of Daily Pulse, where we keep your finger on the pulse of the latest breaking news and the news they're keeping from you. Brought to you by the Vigilant Fox and Zeee Media. I'm your host, Maria Zeee. Jeffrey Epstein's 2019 arrest uncovered hundreds of explicit images of likely underage girls and incriminating videos kept in a safe. Epstein's circle included powerful politicians, billionaires, celebrities, and even intelligence-linked figures. Names that have come up range from Trump, Clinton, Prince Andrew, Bill Gates, Alan Dershowitz, and Les Wexner, just to name a few. A network of lawyers, media allies, staff, and pimps like Ghislaine Maxwell protected and enabled him. Victims who tried to speak out were silenced, and journalists face heavy pushback. Epstein's properties were wired with hidden cameras for blackmail, possibly tied to intelligence services. Those are the claims. But we're now being told that there's nothing to see here, just a bunch of child pornography downloaded by Epstein. The administration's not only refusal to release these files, but lack of commitment to justice for Epstein's victims should raise questions for everyone, and for many, it is the line in the sand. Joining us today is journalist Nick Bryant, who is credited with exposing Epstein's Black Book and flight logs in 2015. Nick Bryant joins us after this short word from one of the sponsors who make this show possible. In his revealing book, The Bible and Gold, author Alan Armstrong examines a troubling truth. Our modern monetary system directly contradicts biblical finance principles of honest weights and measures. Gold isn't just a metal, Armstrong writes. It's God's testimony in the ground that truth is weighty, value is real, and justice is measurable. Genesis Gold Group has built their entire approach to retirement protection on these same timeless principles. While central banks print trillions from nothing, gold remains what God declared it to be in Genesis. Good. Armstrong's exploration of gold and sound money couldn't be more timely. From the tabernacle to Solomon's temple to the streets of New Jerusalem, Scripture consistently presents gold as God's standard of honest value. Genesis Gold Group's faith-driven experts help you transform vulnerable retirement accounts into physical precious metals. Not paper promises, but tangible wealth that preserves purchasing power against the very devaluation Armstrong diagnoses. Why trust your family's future to a system built on monetary deception when there's a biblical alternative? Visit goldbiblepulse.com today for your free copy of The Bible and Gold and schedule a consultation to align your retirement strategy with God's principles of honest money. That's goldbiblepulse.com. Honest money for uncertain times. Nick Bryant, thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate you coming on.
It's great to be with you.
It's great to have you. Well, I am very much looking forward to this deep dive that we're going to do today. You are someone that is very much revered and respected for all of the work that you've been doing on the Epstein case for many years now. You're credited with publishing the flight logs, with publishing the Black Book. And so I would love for you to tell the audience a little bit about yourself and what exactly it was that made you dedicate so much time to researching this particular case before we get into all of the problems that we face today with the Epstein saga.
I was an academic, and my gig was writing academic papers in ethics. I studied philosophy in college, and then I started moonlighting as a journalist. And I'd written all these papers that got published in very good academic journals, and then I'd also written a book, and it absolutely had no effect whatsoever. So, I mean, I was getting paid all right, but I kind of wanted to have an effect. And I took one journalism class in college, and I thought it was really, really boring compared to my philosophy classes. I liked philosophy. But in 1995, a woman who ran an agency that helped prostitutes get off the street was saying that prostitutes were getting murdered by a serial killer. And because she was a lot of people thought that she was unstable. Nobody really took her very serious. I mean, it was easy for the police to not take her very, very seriously. And actually, I found her kind of difficult too when we interacted. But I started talking to some prostitutes who worked the streets, and all of them said that they were being hunted. And through a nice database search, I uncovered like 40 women who were mostly prostitutes that had been, I think it was stabbed, beaten, or strangulated in the previous 8 years.
Wow.
And as I said, they were prostitutes. So obviously there was a serial killer killing prostitutes in Minneapolis. And I took my list to the Minneapolis Police Department and I took my list to the St. Paul Police Department. And I got the St. Paul Police Department to say, yeah, that's a very big possibility. And then the guy in Minneapolis, the head of homicide in Minneapolis, he was a little more reluctant, but he bended a little bit. And then a task force was formed to catch this particular serial killer. And they never caught him. But I thought to myself, I've been writing these academic papers for 5 years, and nobody without multiple degrees has read them. But here I write this article about the serial killer, and all of a sudden a task force is formed. So that kind of really made me focus on journalism. And in 1995, I moved to New York City to pursue my career as a freelance journalist.
Wow. Wow, what an incredible start to that career. So obviously you saw that you could really make a difference with journalism and put some of these values that you, I suppose, put into philosophy into practice, because journalism has a lot to do with ethics, integrity. So I can see how it sort of pushed you towards that path. What is it about the Epstein case specifically that piqued your interest?
So in 2002, I was given an assignment to look into the occult. I was going to write an article about the occult. And I hung out with some occultists and I read their books, found them a little unctuous for the most part. But when you're writing about something, you're always looking for tangential information. And I came across a group called the Finders. And 2 finders were busted in Tallahassee, Florida, with 6 kids that looked like ragamuffins. And a concerned citizen called the Tallahassee Police Department. And the 2 finders, the police came, and the 2 finders were immediately arrested, and the children were immediately put in protective custody. And a doctor had said that 2 of the children showed signs of sexual abuse. And the Washington, D.C. police called the Tallahassee police and said that they've been looking into some cases regarding the finders. One was blood rituals with children. The other was a homicide. And the U.S. Customs, which has an anti-pornography unit, and the D.C. police served a search warrant on the Finders warehouse in Washington, D.C., and they came across all kinds of weird stuff. I mean, pictures of kids that were nude, and actually there was a telex that said that the Finders were buying a couple of kids in Hong Kong, and that they would check out whenever someone advertised for a babysitter. They'd go to the person's house and get as much information from them as possible about the kids. And it was really stunning to me that that this kind of stuff went on. But then it got really stunning because Ramon Martinez wrote the report. He was a U.S. Customs officer, and nothing was happening after they served that search warrant. And he went to the DC police and said, what's up? And he was told by a detective there that the investigation into the Finders had become a CIA internal matter and that there would be no more investigation. Now, a number of things have been written about the Finders, and some people think that they're a cult doing bad things to children. Other people think that they were a commie. But anyway, why would the CIA quash an investigation? I mean, first of all, the CIA isn't legally bound to quash anything in the United States domestically. It's just not in their charter. I mean, they do it all the time, but
Right.
it's not in their charter. So I started to investigate another network that kind of resembled the Finders. There was a lot of internet apocrypha about it, but then basically it was run out of Omaha, Nebraska, and it talked about flying kids from coast to coast and plundering Boys Town for underage prostitutes and intelligence connections and blackmail, and most people that were sensible would kind of write something like that off as kind of crazy. But my philosophic training, I mean, I really try to approach everything agnostically. And I decided to go to Omaha just to check it out. And I was a little skeptical. I mean, I thought something had gone down in Omaha. I thought there was enough smoke for that, but I wasn't really sure what I was going to find. And what I found was much bigger and uglier than I ever could have imagined. And I talked to a victim. I talked to one of the blackmail photographers. I got some documentation that listed 60 kids that this investigator thought had been abused. And there were a number of strange deaths involved with this particular network. And when I was talking to people in Nebraska, it was like I was doing an expose on the KGB and Stalinist Russia. People were frightened. And then I just decided I gotta write a book about this. I mean, all these kids were molested with impunity. I mean, somebody has to do something about this. So I spent the next 7 years researching a book, and I was able to prove a lot of it with sealed grand jury documentation, sealed grand jury exhibits. I was able to find a bunch of the kids. They were hard. A lot of them were hard to find because they came from dysfunctional backgrounds and they'd been repeatedly molested as children. And then if they did well, they were turned on to drugs. And at a certain point, these networks, when the kids lost their youthful marketability, they would just be expunged. And basically, you've got a highly dysfunctional drug addict, and that's not going to make very good choices. So a lot of these victims did not have social security numbers, and they were difficult to find. But they basically, I would find them, and they all said the same thing. And
which was the same sort of stories, a coordinated network, ritual abuse.
Some of them talked about ritual abuse. Most of them didn't. And so the book got published 2009, 2010. I live in New York City, the mecca of publishing, and no one wanted to touch it. And I was originally trying to sell it as an article, and I would meet with editors or publishers, and I could just see the cognitive dissonance going down before my very eyes. They were thinking, this is really a horrible story. I need to help Nick Bryant. Or I can write Nick Bryant off as crazy and I can have a nice meal with my family tonight without any headaches. And I knew a lot of people in the media at that point, and I knew that most of them would be spineless. I didn't think all of them would be spineless. So anyway, the book got published by a small press on the West Coast, and it was really hard. People just didn't want to believe that the government would aid and abet child trafficking. If you cover up a crime, you're in the very least aiding and abetting it. It wasn't a message that people wanted to listen to and or hear. And then I started reading about Epstein, and he had obviously molested a number of girls, but there had been a grand jury that declared he hadn't molested any girls. And that was the same thing with the Franklin scandal. 2 grand juries, a federal and state, concluded that not a single child had been molested. So that made me, and I did not want to do it. I mean, writing the Franklin scandal for 7 years took a toll on me. But, and I was really short on funds because I'd spent so much money. I mean, I'd gotten an advance, but I'd spent so much money. But I decided I've got to go down to Florida and check this out. And I went down to Florida and started knocking on doors. And at some point, a victim's lawyer gave me the black book. And there's under massages, that's a euphemism that Epstein uses for victims. There were under massages was like 175 names. And some of them were actual masseuses, but a lot of them were victims. And
Can I ask you, Nick? I'm curious to know when you compare the Nebraska investigation and the Florida investigation, were you met with more fear when investigating Epstein than the previous case?
Well, I started calling the victims that were in the black book. And that's when I encountered a lot of fear. Most of them wouldn't talk to me, but there were some that did. And they talked about being flown around to different locations. And they also talked about being flown to an island. So at that point in 2012, I realized that I was dealing with an interstate pedophile network, like the Franklin scandal. And I went back to New York with the black book, and I tried to publish an article on the black book, but I was persona non grata with the media. And finally, in 2015, I hooked up with John Cook, who was the editor-in-chief of Gawker, and he said, "We'll do it. We'll do it." And by that time, I'd gotten the flight logs too. So we published the flight logs, and we published the black book, and all of a sudden, the floodgates opened on the black book, and everybody was writing articles. The spineless mainstream media was just waiting for someone to publish it, I guess. I mean, most of them were aware that I had it because I pitched a number of editors and publishers about the black book. So
did you obtain the flight logs through similar means? Someone, victim's lawyer?
Yes,
right?
I obtained the flight logs later, but through similar means. And then Gawker let me write an article about the black book, which was kind of short, but then I wrote a pretty long article about the flight logs. And finally it was out there. And as I said, the floodgates opened, but no one really wanted to give me any credit for ushering the black book and flight logs into public consciousness, which has kind of been a concept. There were two publications that actually mentioned my name, but only one reached out to talk to me about it, which I thought was pretty egregious because I had been on the case for 3 years and I knew a lot about it. And I was in a perfect position after those Gawker articles to write some really good articles about Epstein. But lo and behold, I was not, I just wasn't able to sell anything about Epstein after that. I mean, I was ultimately able to sell stuff about Epstein later, but not in the immediacy of the black book being published.
So what's really interesting is that even though there wasn't a huge amount of interest in you specifically after those things came out, in fact, maybe it was a strategic avoidance of the person who published it. You sort of continued on this case. You continued digging. You continued to expose things. I'm interested now, many, many years later, when we have these promises and we have many people who are now in the administration or close to those who have for years been calling out publicly that we need these files, we need transparency around Epstein. This will take down the deep state, now gaslighting the public essentially and telling us there's nothing to see here, move on with your day. And now, even now, Nick, we have the mainstream media siding with the Trump administration, that no one's interested in this at all, when that is simply not the case.
The thing about the mainstream media, and I really hate to say this, they don't seem to really care about children. I am not aware, and I've been following Epstein for quite some time. I am not aware of one major media outlet that has called for justice in this case. They're very good at digging up salacious dirt about Epstein's cronies, but no one said, hey, all these children were molested. We need some justice. And which is, I mean, the fourth estate is supposed to be something that checks the power of the government. And our fourth estate and the government have become one essentially in their lies about Epstein or apathy about Epstein. And it's really, it's a sad commentary on our media.
Well, let's go through some of the lies, because it's not just the media that's lying. The administration is not being forthright about much of this. Promises that were made have not been kept. And in fact, even Trump's own supporters, he's told them, if you want to know about this, you're not my supporters anymore. He's called it a hoax. He's called it, all sorts of a Democrat hoax. So what I want to know from you, Nick, is, throughout your investigation, is this simply a Democrat problem or simply a Republican problem? I maintain that these types of sick behaviors go on all sides of the aisle. What have your investigations concluded? We want to tell you about Block Trust IRA, bringing access to cryptocurrency wealth to real Americans. Their Animus AI trading platform works 24/7, analyzing market data and executing advanced crypto strategies that are beyond simply buy and hold, helping true Americans build impressive wealth. There's a reason their system was named the #1 crypto technology platform by Bitcoin Magazine from over 1,500 global competitors. Whether you're a teacher, truck driver, small business owner, or retiree watching inflation eat away your 401k, Block Trust IRA's advanced Animus AI gives red-blooded Americans the same advantages as those coastal elites. Right now, their clients are seeing over 250% returns on their investments, and with military-grade security, investments are protected by up to $200 million in insurance. So don't wait. Visit dailypulsecrypto.com and find out how they can help you join the financial revolution that's finally giving forgotten Americans access to the greatest crypto wealth opportunity in history. For a limited time, they're offering our viewers up to $2,500 in bonus crypto when you open an account. Crypto created 80,000 new millionaires last year. Why not you next? Visit dailypulsecrypto.com. That's dailypulsecrypto.com.
The cover up of Jeffrey Epstein has been a bipartisan effort. It was initially covered up under the Bush administration, a Republican administration. Then it was covered up under Obama, a Democratic administration. Then it was covered up under Trump, a Republican administration. Then it was covered up by Biden, a Democratic administration. And now it's being covered up by Trump again. So both parties are equally guilty in covering up the crimes against children of Jeffrey Epstein.
And why would they want to cover this up?
I think that people are being protected for sure, very powerful people. But I also believe that our political system, there's a tremendous amount of blackmail in it. And I believe that people are being protected, or not only are people being protected, but a political system that's rife with blackmail is also.
How do we know?
protected.
How do we know that there's blackmail?
There's certainly accounts that I've come across, but I found this kind of amazing. About a year and a half ago, a U.S. congressman from Tennessee, Tim Burchett, said publicly that my colleagues are being blackmailed in honey traps. So, yeah, and I never thought I'd hear that from like a sitting U.S. congressman, that my clients or my colleagues are being blackmailed in honey traps. Honey traps are as old as politics themselves. There was a muckraking journalist who came across a story about Alexander Hamilton being black. He was having an affair with a married 23-year-old woman, and her husband was blackmailing him. And the muckraker outed Alexander Hamilton, and Jefferson and Hamilton had a tremendous amount of antipathy. So the muckraker thought that Jefferson would give him an appointment in his administration. And when Jefferson didn't, he outed Jefferson for having sex with one of his slaves, Sally Hemings. So political blackmail is as old as our republic. I mean, it's just, I mean, people think that only the Russians do it, but everybody does it.
Right. And I think it would be incredibly naive to deny that political blackmail goes on. This type of blackmail with Epstein, though, is something of a really specific nature. It's incredibly sick. We're talking about potentially people on all at all levels of government, both domestic and international, corporations, celebrities, being on tape abusing children. This is the potential of what we're talking about now. We're told that the only information that the Pam Bondi had a truckload of information that was coming to her. By the way, that truckload was coming from an office that was allegedly withholding information from her, but she entrusted the delivery of that information to that office that was allegedly withholding information from her. So that's the first hole in her story. But then the truckload came, and apparently it's just thousands of hours of only Epstein's collection of child pornography. We're talking about a guy that had cameras in every room. Nick, how likely is it that those statements are correct?
Well, I believe that Jeffrey Epstein was a blackmailer, and there's been a number of accounts of the hidden cameras in his. And I wrote a book called Confessions of a DC Man, The Politics of Sex, Lies, and Blackmail. And I wrote it with someone who ran the largest gay escort service ever uncovered in DC. And CIS would use his gay escorts to compromise closeted politicians. And with the Franklin scandal, same thing. A lot of the kids were flown to DC, and there was a party house that was wired for audiovisual blackmail. So this is something that is recurring, but the media doesn't report on it. And that's what makes it very difficult. But I think with Epstein, the media is beginning to see. There was a CBS poll that found 89% of Americans want to see transparency. But there's a number of lies that Bondi has told that she just keeps digging herself deeper and deeper and deeper into a hole. She did apparently trust that division of the FBI with a truckload of evidence that basically didn't want to give her anything,
Right?
and which is a problem. But then after she got the truckload of evidence, she said that any matters related to national security will be redacted. So now she's dug herself into a deeper hole. She has to tell us why a bunch of child molesters have anything to do with national security. I mean, so, but right. I mean, the crescendo of her mendacity was the day after Epstein was arrested in 2019, or actually the morning after Epstein was arrested, the FBI sawed open his safe. Now, he had a huge safe. It was the size of a closet. And according to the New York Times, there were many discs that were pulled out that included hundreds to thousands of pictures, child abuse images. And then Business Insider reported that there were hard drives taken out. And we're supposed to believe that that evidence wasn't looked at the day that it was taken out. I mean, I think that people probably work double shifts watching all that stuff that was taken out of Epstein's safe. So for her to imply that for information or digital stuff is only being looked at now is pretty egregious. I mean, that's a very, I mean, to think that it was all this Epstein material with the hard drives and it was just sitting in some corner of the FBI collecting dust and no one looked at it. I mean, That's
It's positively bizarre. The other point that I raised at the time that she said, Nick, that it was just thousands of hours of child pornography that Epstein had downloaded from the internet. Well, if that is the case, say that is absolutely what they found. Have you actually investigated whether there's a common thread here? Is there a particular source where he was getting this from that you can trace? Is there a international pedophile ring that you can take down? Have you opened an investigation? Are you working with Interpol to see if this is a worldwide pedophile? Do you know what? There was just nothing. Oh, we found thousands of hours of child pornography. Whose faces? Is there a common face there that you can potentially take down? There was nothing, Nick. And this is where I think, even if that was the case, the lack of follow up on that is egregious.
I mean, the Department of Justice and FBI released a very strange document on July 6th. Very strange. I mean, it had the logo of the Department of Justice, had the logo of the FBI, but nobody signed it.
Right.
And there were actually a couple of things that I agree with. That there were 300 gigabytes, over 300 gigabytes of information that were impounded from Epstein. I agree with that. And the document, that's very strange document that no one signed, said there's over 1,000 Epstein victims. I also agree with that. But then it's essentially said that Epstein acted alone. There's some sophistry there where you could include Maxwell, but it essentially said that Epstein acted alone and that there was no blackmail involved, which we know who a bunch of the Epstein pimps are. The New York Times wrote an article, a full-page article, and it named Ghislaine Maxwell, Sarah Kellen, Leslie Groff, Adriana Ross, and Nadia Marcinkova, and Haley Robson of being pimps or procurers. I mean, and then Kellen, Groff, Ross, and Marcinkova were included in the non-prosecution agreement, were named explicitly in the non-prosecution agreement. They obviously played an integral role in Jeffrey Epstein getting children. And so, I mean, we could start with them. I mean, if the Department of Justice really wanted to investigate this, you could take Kellen, Groff, Ross, and Marcinkova, although Marcinkova has kind of been missing in action lately, you could take them, charge them with multiple counts of child trafficking or engaging a conspiracy to commit child trafficking. Child trafficking is a heavy-duty sentence in the federal system. It's 15 years to life. So if you put them on the grill and charge them with multiple counts of child trafficking, they're going to turn over on the perps. I mean, it would be that simple. And then there are over 1,000 victims. And we know who a lot of them are, and I'm sure that the feds know who most of them are, and they could testify about their perpetrators.
Well, a lot of them just keep dying under mysterious circumstances too, so there's that.
Well, Virginia grew free. I wrote an article. You can go to my blog, nicknyc.com, and I wrote an article about Virginia. I do believe that she committed suicide. I knew her. We'd never met, but we talked on the phone a number of times, and we'd exchanged a number of emails. I do believe that she did kill herself, and she was a victim of child sexual abuse. I mean, really bad child sexual abuse.
Her father questions the suicide.
Yeah, I mean, her father does, but her brother and sister-in-law who were living with her at the time don't. And I would lay out a chronology that, and actually victims of child sexual abuse, their suicide rate is at least three times higher than the general population. And those pictures of her that were all battered and bruised, that was not from a bus that hit the car that she was in. She went to the hospital that day and they discharged her shortly thereafter in the morning. Those bruises came from her husband beating her up. And I think that he was able to get custody of the children. And if you look at the pictures, I mean, he really beat her up. Something has got to be done about that. And I think he's probably got all of her money too. So Virginia was in a very bad way. The husband had managed to get the kids and make her look like an incompetent mother, which she wasn't. And then just really, I mean, he'd been beating her up for quite some time, but that last picture of her is really, that's really horrific.
But that's
That
the
was a
first I'm hearing about that particular incident. I'd love to learn more about it. I'll have to look into it. I remember reading that the I think she was saying the school bus was going 100 kilometers per hour. I thought it was quite strange in a rural area, Western Australia. A bus going 100 miles an hour is unheard of, really. It's not unheard of, but it's just not typically what buses, the speed that buses drive at.
school buses.
School buses, right. So I just thought that it was a very strange story to begin with. But we have other Epstein victims that have voiced, I've forgotten her name now, it's escaped me. There's one particular vocal one who's voiced her concern about her life. It's all of these people are in danger, basically, and the longer the cover up goes on, the more in danger they are, whether it be the particular suicide rates that you're talking about that are higher amongst victims, or just the state potentially targeting these people. I mean, it's just the reality. And I think Anna Paulina Luna spoke about that as well. She said every day that goes by, these victims are in danger. It seems that all of her efforts to push this matter were stifled, and now she's moved on herself. So I don't really know what's going on there. I don't know if it was all just theatre to begin with. But there's something I want to ask you about, Nick, which is the NatSec issue, the national security issue. You raised a very, very important point there, which is that they said that they would redact things for national security. Why would pedophilia have anything to do with national security? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, we know why. I mean, it's blackmail, but we need the government to come clean on that. I mean, that's what we really do. And I'm the director of a 501c3 nonprofit called Epstein Justice. And we want two simple things. We want to know why the government covered up, aided and abetted child trafficking. If you cover up a crime, you're aiding and abetting. So in the very least, the government is aiding and abetting child trafficking. And we want the perpetrators to be prosecuted. Two very simple things. But we're going to need a congressional commission to accomplish that. And that's where the difficulties lie. But I would say to your audience, check out EpsteinJustice.com. We give weekly webinars or monthly webinars on how, and provide people tools on how they can pressure their federal legislators to vote for this commission. And we've got Thomas Massey behind us too. He's pledged that he'll support.
I find it very interesting, Nick, that there's quite a lot of attacks on Thomas Massey at the moment, a super PAC that's formed backed by President Trump to take him out of the race. And he's been one of the most vocal people on this. You mentioned Tim Burchett previously. He's also pushing for the release of the information related to Epstein. I think the client list is a bit of a it's a bit funny because sure, there wouldn't be a specific client list that says this person trafficked, abused this child on this date. I don't necessarily believe Epstein was keeping a spreadsheet, but surely the video footage and other documentation that they have in their possession would give us a list that we could compile.
The problem was, I mean, Massey's bill, the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, adjourned Congress early.
Yes.
So it couldn't vote on Massey's investigation into Jeffrey Epstein. Mike Johnson, there's something very strange about Mike Johnson. He's got an app on his phone, and his 17-year-old has an app on his phone where they monitor each other's consumption of pornography. Now, I don't know. I mean, I think that that's pretty weird, if you ask me. That
I was not aware of that.
Yeah, it's called Covenant Eyes, and yes, it allows them to monitor. So, if Speaker Johnson is into like macabre pornography or anything with minors, it wouldn't be tough for our national security state to access his phone. And that is something. Why would a guy who professes to be a Christian, why would he adjourn Congress early so it couldn't investigate Jeffrey Epstein's pedophile network? That's very suspicious. He is the third most powerful man in the United States. We had a Speaker of the House, Dennis Hastert. He was Speaker from 1999 to 2006 or 7, one of the longest reigning Speakers of the House ever. And he had molested little boys going back 30 years, 40 years. And when he got out of politics, one of his victims was blackmailing him. And he was making withdrawals from the bank. And the FBI came after him instead of the guy that was blackmailing him. And then it did come out that he'd molested other kids when he was a teacher in Illinois. So that's an important person to have compromised, the Speaker of the House, because, as I said, constitutionally, he's the third most powerful man in the country. And I got to one of the blackmail photographers of the Franklin scandal, and I was trying to get my mind around this. I mean, there's no books that are written about this. Well, now there is, the Franklin scandal, and I'm working on an Epstein book right now. But I asked him, how does this work? And he said, once you're compromised, it's like you're on a yacht. It's a beautiful yacht, and it's a beautiful day, and you can have anything you want on the yacht. But if you decide to get off the yacht, the people on the yacht are going to make sure that you drown. So for some inexplicable reason, Dennis Hastert got off the yacht. I think it was greed. I mean, the FBI knew about him when he was Speaker of the House, about his shadow life. So he was obviously compromised. I believe he was compromised during his speakership. But for some reason, he decided to get off the yacht. I think it was greed. He was making millions of dollars as a lobbyist. And I think he might have stepped on someone's toes that he shouldn't have, because he thought he was Dennis Hastert. So
how important, what sorts of things are we thinking that this blackmail ring helps to achieve? I note there was a specific meeting that involved Bill Gates, the United Nations. The ties with Epstein really go all the way to the UN. What sorts of worldwide politics controls are happening with this network, and is it still happening today, do you believe?
How could it not be happening today? When I was pitching the Franklin scandal, people said, well, this couldn't be happening now. Meanwhile, Epstein was happening while I was pitching the Franklin scandal. I think if you look at the money and where it goes, you'll notice that Trump really hasn't whittled down the military industrial complex as far as outlays. I mean, he's made a bunch of cuts to USAID and other organizations or agencies, but he really hasn't touched the military. And I think that, and the CIA, and I think that's a telltale sign that he's not willing to go that far. And I think what we've seen from his administration really kind of demonstrates that he's willing to only go so far. He's not willing to give us transparency on Epstein, and he's not willing to make any Pentagon cuts. And Jimmy Carter made Pentagon cuts and CIA cuts, and it didn't work out very well for him, as did Richard Nixon, and it didn't work out very well for him. So if you're a president, you got to give money to the Pentagon and also to the CIA, or else it could have deleterious consequences.
It's very interesting, Nick, because I feel the sentiment from a lot of people is that they expected that President Trump, that they feel President Trump represented the guy that was going to come and smash the deep state to pieces. He was going to come and expose all of this. He was going to expose the Epstein saga. He was going to expose the intel agencies. We're seeing some of that where it relates to, say, Russiagate, for example, in drips and drabs. And of course, that is also, I think, strategic in order to move the attention away from Epstein. But I think a lot of people feel disappointed in the fact that it's not turning out quite how they expected. Do you think that maintaining the public pressure is going to change things when they come back from this early recess that they took? Are we going to see Thomas Massie going full steam ahead? He's promised he will.
Well, that's where Epstein justice comes in, is because Americans are going to have to really pressure their congresspeople into making this, making a congressional commission a reality. There's 30 million, 340 million Americans. If we had 1% of Americans march on Washington, D.C., 1%, then I think that a lot of things could happen. And here's where there's a lot of problems. According to the Centers for Disease Control, 25% of underage girls have been molested and 5% of underage boys. There's a lot of people in the field that think it's a little conservative for underage girls and way conservative for underage boys. So, but if you just go with the CDC numbers, you've got over 50 million Americans that have been molested. And the vast majority of them are never going to see justice. But if we allow Epstein to get away with what he's gotten away with, and actually the government, if we let them get away with what they're getting away with, we can't allow the Justice Department to be unresponsive to victims in the Epstein case, a proven sex trafficking case, child sex trafficking case, because that would send a message to millions of victims that they have no voice and no hope for justice. Right. And we have to clean out our government of this, but then we have to show the at least 50 million Americans that have been molested that, hey, you have a voice and you can have justice. You have the potential for justice. If I was a victim of child sexual abuse and I saw the Epstein cover up, I mean, it's very hard in and of itself to be, I have never been abused, but I've talked to a number of victims. In and of itself, it's very hard to come forward, especially to accuse your perpetrators, because the litigation can get very ugly. So we need to show these victims that the Justice Department can work and that they can have a voice and have justice.
Absolutely. I think that's the key in all of this. When you said something before, which is the media is more than happy to cover the salacious details of this saga, but never, or almost never, focuses on the victims and those who were harmed by this and are potentially still being harmed by this. I'm someone who doesn't believe it ended with Epstein. And God only knows what's going on now. Now we have, Ghislaine being moved to a really cushy minimum security facility. Apparently, this is according to a journalist that's obtained some information that includes may include the ability for her to be released to go to work. And so this is, I can't really imagine. I don't know what sort of deal you would make. And of course you have President Trump, the ability to pardon Ghislaine Maxwell is in President Trump's hands. And so naturally it would be beneficial for her to clear his name. I'm certainly not suggesting he's implicated one way or the other. I'm just saying it would be beneficial for Ghislaine to clear his name if she's seeking a pardon from him. At the same time, being moved to this cushy facility, potentially being allowed to go out and work like Epstein was. What exactly was his going out to work? What did that look like? Well, we all know. It's all very, very disturbing, Nick. And at the top of all of this really is the people who've suffered under this. And so I am of the firm belief and support you in your efforts to make sure that those victims don't go without seeing justice. This is a number one priority.
as Americans, we have to put our foot down and just say, no, we can't allow this. Americans have eaten a lot of lies over the years. And I believe that, I'm not saying that it was intentionally released, but I believe that COVID came from that Wuhan lab. And now the government is even conceding that, or people in the government are conceding that. But at the time, if you said that, the AI would just disintegrate whatever you posted. So there were lies about that we ate. And then there was the financial meltdown that was caused by the banks and rating agencies in 2007, 2008. We ate a lot of lies there. And then there were the lies that put us in Iraq, that bogged us down in unbelievable long war and carnage. And God knows how many people got killed because of those lies. So Americans have been eating lies for a long time, but this is different. This is our children getting molested. I just don't think that we can eat any lies about this. I think that the chances are Americans will eventually unite, and that's what I'm hoping with Epstein Justice, that your audience visit EpsteinJustice.com and let's get this going. Let's make sure that we the people, make this happen. The government is beholden to we the people. We the people are not beholden to the government.
We pay their wages. This is the thing that really just strikes me when people say, "Oh, the government's doing this." Yeah, that you can stop them. You are their employer. You can't just let your employees run wild all the time with the salaries that you're paying them. That would never work in a private corporation. Why are we allowing it to work in a relationship where essentially they're our employees? It just doesn't make sense to me. People need to remember that they're the ones in charge. Nick, I just pulled up the EpsteinJustice.com website. This is where people can go, EpsteinJustice.com. There's a step-by-step process to follow to get involved and join the movement and help. You can also go to Nick Bryant NYC to view all of his articles, his interviews, the full library of his work. And of course, you've also got your X account, Nick, which is at Nick__Bryant. Is there anything else that you want to direct people to?
No, for me, it's most important that people visit EpsteinJustice.com. I've written books, but I would much rather have people go to EpsteinJustice.com than write the books or buy the books that I've written. EpsteinJustice.com is very, very important to me.
Well, we appreciate your time, Nick. Thank you so much for coming on and talking to us about all of this. And we plan on continuing to be honest with everyone about this issue. I'm very concerned about people that are trying to sweep it under the rug. It is the most egregious case, I think, in modern history, at least. And we need to get to the bottom of it. Thank you so much for your work on this.
Have a good night.
Are you protected in a world where threats of EMPs, solar flares, 5G, and all types of EMF are interfering with our very existence? Escape the grid with Escape Zone, bringing you the highest quality Faraday technology for ultimate preparedness. Choose when and where your devices are detectable. Faraday bags protect you from EMPs, car theft, card and device skimming, identity theft, tracking, Bluetooth, and GPS. Choose from premium mobile Faraday bags, crossbody bags, laptop bags, and even women's handbags, or opt for the optimum protection with a ballistic backpack, combining cutting-edge Faraday technology with a ballistic 3A Kevlar for the ultimate protection and preparedness. Now you can also protect from EMF with their top-notch EMF beanies and blankets, shielding you from some of the most harmful frequencies in our environment. Whatever your needs are, Escape Zone has you covered, and their range is perfect for personal use, family use, or even as a gift for someone you truly care about. Visit escapezone.com/pulse and protect you and your loved ones today. That's escapezone.com/pulse. Thank you all for tuning in tonight in this pursuit of truth and justice. We are very grateful to all of our viewers and supporters of this show. We air every single weeknight at 7 p.m. Eastern, and we plan on continuing to bring you the latest breaking news and the news they're keeping from you. We are backed by you, the viewer. That way we can always tell you the truth, no holds barred. The way to support us to stay independent is by shopping directly with our sponsors who make this show possible. Their links are in the description below. Make sure to follow Vigilant Fox on X at Vigilant Fox, as well as Substack to stay up to date with the latest breaking news. Follow Zeee Media on Rumble, where we also air this show each weekday and post our other deep dives. Follow at ZEE_media on X, and as always, all of our content is also on zeemedia.com. Join us every weeknight at 7 p.m. Eastern. Tell everyone about it, and as always, keep your finger on the pulse with the Daily Pulse. Have a great weekend, everyone. Good night.